Hi, Garth. Hi, Sil.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, hello, hi, Sil. How are you?
Good. Testing.
So, hi, Sil. Right now, it's just you, me, and Garth, right?
That is correct.
So nobody else can hear us, right?
Yeah, we're early.
Okay. So, did you go through these slides? Did you hope you have right?
Hello, sound check. Hi, Sel and Sammy. Can we do a sound check?
Yeah, we can. Me and Sammy have been talking to each other.
Awesome, great. And the attendees can hear us, so we want to welcome Ali, Donato, Hanan, and Mahesh, and Adil. Everybody welcome, and we'll be starting the webinar in a few more minutes. And thank you for coming in early. Adil, I see you holding up your hand. Did you have a question for us? If you'd like to talk, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, so hi Garth, hi Sami.
Hi, Adil.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was having some trouble regarding my audio, but seems to be working fine.
Yeah, and on the Zoom webinar, the attendees are not able to speak. It's just a presenter mode. That's probably why, if you're wondering how that works.
Okay, all right, so sounds good. So I mean, if you, I think you will need us during the Q&A, so it's all right then.
Yeah, and we'll exactly when we get to the Q&A, there's ability to and I'll be telling the audience the ability to put in chat. There's a chat window for questions, and then we have the ability to unmute people so that they can speak at that point. So we're happy to do that. But what's nice about it is it keeps the background noise down in case there's noise or dogs or other noise in the background.
All right, sounds good.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you. Again, want to welcome those of you who are joining the Test Automation Synergy webinar. And we will be getting going in about 2 more minutes. So it's just now in California at 8 o'clock Pacific time, 8 in the morning. And I know a number of you are in different time zones. So we'll just give people who plan to join at 8 o'clock and have to load in the Zoom webinar information, give them 2 minutes to join, and then we'll get going with the webinar. Again, thanks everybody. We'll be starting in 1 more minute. So it's now 8:01 Pacific time, and we've still got people coming in and joining in to the webinar. Welcome, you're in the right place. There's no audio problems. We just are waiting to start the webinar in 1 more minute. And again, thank you for joining us. Okay, all right. So I'm going to come off of sharing my screen and just pause for a moment, turn the camera on, and want to welcome everybody. So my name is Garth Rose. I'm co-founder and CEO of GenRocket. I'm here with Heisel Taylor. Heisel.
Hi, I am Heisel Taylor. I'm co-founder and CTO of GenRocket.
And we're here with Sami Ullah. Sami, can you please say hello to the group?
Sami, you're on mute.
I think you're on mute.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, well, so Sami, we'll keep going. So Sami Ullah is with our partner Kualitatem, and the Kualitatem and GenRocket are very excited to bring this webinar to you, and we want to get going. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can introduce the webinar and the agenda to everybody. Okay. So what are we going to be covering today? And before I get into that, I felt it was important to note that we're in a very unusual time in our world. Of course, COVID-19 is spreading across the world. I know in India, for example, they have a 3-week lockdown. Here in the United States and California, the same. So many of you are likely attending from home, and I know that there's distractions and other things and fears and concerns. So we're very grateful that you're taking some time out of your day to join us for this webinar. So wanted to thank you for that. And in terms of the webinar agenda, we're going to cover the state of the test data market as we see it from a GenRocket perspective, and talking about a trend that we're seeing about moving from test data management to test data automation. We'll introduce the GenRocket TDA architecture. We'll show a live demo, and we'll also show a solutions demo. So when we talk about test automation synergy, sometimes seeing is believing. So we'd like to give you an example of that. We'll then introduce our partner Kualitatem, and they'll talk about some of their TDA, test data automation solution capabilities. It's very important for us to have a question and answer. So we try to allocate the time so that we can really have this be interactive. So if you haven't used Zoom webinar before, and it is my first time using this, there is a chat capability, and we will see those chat messages. So I want to invite you, as we're going through the webinar, type in your questions, and when we get to the end, which again will be about of the presentation piece, we'll have very much an interactive discussion. We can answer those questions verbally to you. We can even open it up so you can verbally ask your questions as well. So that's the proposed agenda. And now I want to move on to sort of starting to set the stage. Why are we here together today? Well, because test data is an industry-wide problem. And the good news is that there's an exploding use of test automation in the marketplace, and there's lots of good open source tools and vendor tools. But at the end of the day, test data is not keeping up. So when you look at the latest World Quality Report, what are they telling us? 69% of organizations are using spreadsheets to generate data. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't some production data being used whether using a vendor tool or in-house tools to move data to a staging environment, a lower environment. But at the end of the day, when the tester wants to have test data for a test case, so often they're not able to provision what they need. They drop it back into a spreadsheet and start creating the permutations or the edge cases or manipulating the data. And that's what we're showing here in this 33%. One of our large global financial services firms is using a TDM tool, but they tell us about a third of the time they can reach into that production data and get the data they need. 2/3 of the time they cannot. About a third of the time they can manipulate that in a spreadsheet, and a third of the time they're stuck. It just is not going to be a match. That's not really what we'd call automation, is it, when we're going to a spreadsheet? A large American healthcare insurance company is using a TDM tool, and they have a lot of data variations, a lot of changing situations in their environment. And they're saying the very fastest that they can get data for their test data needs is 34 days. And then 65 is the outside. So that's the window. That is not an automated environment where we're trying to do a CI/CD pipeline, daily releases. That's just not going to work. And of course, 59% of the market is still creating data manually. So when I give you these bullets, this is what we're seeing in the marketplace. Heisel Taylor and I are on calls, 5 to 10 calls with large enterprises every single week. And we're hearing the data is too slow. We don't have the quality that we need for all of our test cases. And too much of what we're doing is manual. So we're really advocating at GenRocket an evolution in test data provisioning. And so we're going from test data management. And what is that? Whether it's a vendor tool or an in-house solution, it's copying the production database, masking it, subsetting it, oftentimes requesting data to come over, and then going through a refresh process, really to moving to something much more automated, much more nimble, which is being able to quickly set up the application data model and then generate the data that's necessary on demand. Sometimes we need to query enumerated production data values, and we can blend those with that data. And this is very much a self-service model. That is a real evolution in terms of how the market has thought about test data really for decades. It's a whole new shift in thinking, but it's really what's necessary to keep up with today's test data automation. So here's our vision. We're really seeing that the marketplace wants much faster delivery, much higher quality, and much more automation. So for delivery, what's that mean? Well, we can quickly design the data we need and map it to our test cases. The data is delivered on demand in real time. One of our customers uses the term on demand real time, zero touch. It's automated. They can have very accurate, predictable, and controlled test data. And if we need to blend in query like an account number or a member ID in healthcare, we can do that. And a lot of automations, and this is very much of our vision at GenRocket, is to say, can we automate the process of delivering permutations and combinations and edge cases and negative data? Can we make intelligent automated decisions so that a human doesn't have to sit there and look at a result manually, just automate that whole process? And we have APIs that do that at GenRocket. And then just an automated lifecycle management. We know you have dynamic environments and things are changing. So also being able to just take that into account and automate that process. That is the vision. And that's what we're delivering on. GenRocket is a test data automation platform. It's extremely fast, has numerous automations, industry-leading data quality, and is very attractively priced. And we think of today's environment we're all in together. in terms of risk and concerns, being able to implement something that's much lower cost is going to be very attractive to many of you, whether you're in a partner ecosystem or whether you're with an enterprise customer. We've been around for 9 years. We've been refining this platform with customer experience. We've got customers across the world in 10 different vertical markets. And our average customer, 60% of our customers they're very large, have a revenue of over $1 billion. And this is the only patented test data platform in the marketplace. We received the patent back in 2017. So we want to show you a live demo, but we've learned that before we do that, we need to give you the sort of the key components. Once you understand these components and how they play together, that will be very helpful in understanding how you can apply GenRocket potentially to your particular circumstance. So there's 5 key components. And the first component is the domain. It's a noun, a person, place, or thing. So you might think organization domain, department domain, user domain, address domain. No limit on the number of domains or hierarchy. We're showing a user domain here, a person domain. What are the characteristics of that user domain? We call them attributes. So a name, a password, a phone number, a date of birth, a credit card. These are all possible attributes of a user domain. How do we generate the data? We associate a generator. And a generator has parameters that control very accurately exactly the data that is produced. So for example, numerous name gen generators, but one of them has the ability to have a parameter of first name or last name or male name or female name, around 40 million different combinations. Credit card has the same kind of control. Social Security for the United States has a similar kind of control. So you can see how they can really generate the data that we need. And we also have query generators that can query and blend in particular production data values. Now, the 4th key component is the receiver. So the generator is generating raw data. It's not formatted yet. That's the job of the receiver. And we, by the way, currently have about 258 generators. Started the company with 13 and now have 258. Why? Because customers demanded those generators. And we currently have 61 different receivers. Started the company with 4. So the point of that is what? Customers demanded this over the last 9 years, and we built the receivers to meet their requirements. And we add new generators and receivers at no cost. So currently, these are just examples of the 61 receivers. So GenRocket can produce data in XML or nested XML, JSON, nested JSON, fixed file formats like CSV and VSAM for mainframes, any kind of database, Oracle, DB2, SQL, MySQL, and of course, NoSQL, whether we're dealing with blobs or globs, NoSQL databases like MongoDB. We can talk in over SOAP, over REST, JDBC, any kind of web service. And we even have specialty formats in banking like BAI2, Nacha, and in healthcare HL7, and even X12 EDI, the only solution that's partnered with the X12 organization for producing EDI test data, and even ecosystems like Salesforce. So I think you get a good idea of the component architecture. Now, the 5th and final component is the scenario. It's an instruction set. We have a concept that, by the way, the instruction set that runs and executes, it generates the data. We have a concept at GenRocket of 1 scenario per domain. So this is actually 3 scenarios linked together with referential integrity. And scenarios have a loop count. So the organization scenario will run and it'll generate 3 organizations. And then for each organization, it'll produce 3 departments. That's 9 departments. And then for each department, it's going to produce 3,000 users. So ultimately, this scenario chain will produce 27,000 users all across 3 departments and 9 departments and 3 organizations. And because the receiver will say output to XML and SQL, it will take care of that in terms of the formatting of the data. So there it is. You can see the component-based architecture. You can see how flexible it is, because we can always add new generators in 1 to 3 business days and receivers in 2 to 3 weeks. So this is a completely flexible architecture. By the way, for a typical automated test case, it'll generate data in about 100 milliseconds. That's 1/10 of a second. But it also scales up to large use cases where, you know, about 10,000 rows of data per second, but we have some ability to generate data in parallel. So we can generate millions or billions of rows of data in minutes. Now we're going to go to the live demo, but we have just showing you where this is going to be coming from. So we have on-premise hosting, dedicated private cloud hosting, but also we'll be doing this demo on our most popular model. About 90% of customers are on a VPC or virtual private cloud. You'll see Heisel Taylor, our CTO, logging into the GenRocket virtual private cloud. He'll be building a project, a test data project. He'll give it a name. Then you'll see him building out a domain with the different attributes and generators and adding a receiver. And that'll wrap itself up into a GenRocket encrypted instruction set called a scenario. He's then going to download that scenario to his local machine. And this is the beauty of today's environment where everybody is at home, or most people are home right now, is that while we can collaborate in the cloud, we also can have all data. This could be a test automation server in the security of the corporate environment. And that machine, it could be Linux, it could be Windows, it could be Mac, has a GenRocket runtime. It runs on Java, so pretty much any machine. And that automation server can then generate the data, and all the tests can, whether it's regressions or the tests, can be run. And notice all of the data generation in this model are on-premise. Okay, I'd like to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to go over to Heisel Taylor to do the live demo. Heisel, over to you.
Thank you, Garth. Let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see your screen.
Okay, so I'm logging into our virtual private cloud at app.genrocket.com. I'm going into our GenRocket organization. This would necessarily be your organization. As soon as you come into the GenRocket, you'll come to the main dashboard, which is our project dashboard right here, and you'll see three different panes. I'm going to go into the first pane where it's going to create a brand new project. I'm just going to call this live demo. As soon as this happens, GenRocket builds out your project in the background, and then it presents you with the first project version, so you can do many versions of this as you go along. Now we have a set of different panes where we can do operations. We're going to go to the domain pane, where we have the ability in many different ways to create a domain. I'm actually going to create one from scratch using our scratch pad. I'm going to generate the typical domain that is probably found in every database or most applications, because most applications have to work with the user. So I'm going to put in some common attributes: first name, last name. Let's see, let's use password, username, password. Now, what GenRocket does is it goes out to its data warehouse and looks for the most common generators to add to the most common name attributes. As you can see right there, even though we spelled middle incorrectly, we have a match. And I'm just going to add a few more attributes here. I'm going to add social security number, add card number, and then I'm going to add a phone number. And I'm going to come back to some of these and talk about them in a little bit more detail. But you can see how quickly we can go in and create a domain, add some attributes, and then actually start to see a preview of what that data looks like. Now, as soon as we create a domain, we immediately get 3 domain variables here automatically. And the first one is called the ID. Now, we use this ID because we're trying to establish referential integrity and a starting point where data will be generated for a particular domain. So for instance, the ID, its generator, is already looking and referencing this value, as well as the username is already referencing the ID. So when I change this to 1000, you'll also see these 2 particular generators change. ID is automatically referencing this, and we'll see the username is referencing this as well. The next one is a loop count. So when we create a scenario, the first thing it does is it looks by default at the loop count to say, what do you want me to generate? And right now I'm saying I want to generate 10,000 users. Now, if you see me doing a refresh here, you'll see that the values for first name and last name and middle initial, they are randomly changing. The seed, which is a global seed here, which I could assign to many of these generators, would guarantee that the same, based on the integer value, that the same random data gets generated every single time. Now, let's go over and take a look at some of our attributes. The ID attribute is automatically added to a domain when it's created. And this we use for referential integrity because most databases, many databases we work with don't always guarantee referential integrity. GenRocket has to guarantee it. Now, I could make this invisible, where you can see it's grayed out, which means a receiver actually doesn't see it, even though we're maintaining referential integrity. Or we could choose some other attribute as the primary. You'll see down here that this particular attribute is associated to a range gen generator. I'm going to talk about this one real quick because all generators work the same way. They just have different parameters. So this one has a start range, end range, and a few other parameters. So if I click on that start range, you can see I was actually looking at the global ID. If we go down here to the end range, we'll see the end range can go to max long. And here's, I have a jump and a wait amount. So I'm going to change these to 3 and 3. And right now you'll see data is being generated in the sequence. And now you'll see that it's waiting 3 and it's jumping 3. And I'm showing you this because each generator has its own set of parameters that determines its behavior. So for instance, the first name here, it has it uses a name gen generator, which has 1,000 first names, 3,000 last names, and 3,000 female names, 1,000 male names, and 10,000 last names to give us a combination of around 40 million different names. Middle initial just simply uses the alphabet gen, which does the alphabet in a random or sequential order. And here's that username. As we see, it was doing a reference here to the ID. I'm going to remove this one, just show you how quickly you can add your own generator. So as I said, the data warehouse does its best to assign a generator to each attribute, but many times you want to go ahead and change that to associate it to a particular attribute or more than one attribute to get the type of data that you want. So I'm just going to type in here concat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a constant first called user. And you'll see that that's not unique because it's just user. I'm going to double click this and I'm choosing one of the attributes for my pattern. And I chose the ID. So what I've done is I concatenated the value that's being generated by the ID. So I put in the, here's a password. I'm encrypting. In this situation, in real time, you can see I can quickly change the encryption value and we can see what's being encrypted. And what am I encrypting? Well, I'm encrypting the ID. I could easily encrypt something like the username. I probably wouldn't want to encrypt the first name, last name, or middle initial because they don't follow a particular pattern and I can't test with that. But you can see how quickly I can go in and make these changes. That social security number I added, these are real social security numbers. They're just following a pattern. And again, I can change that pattern or not. And I can also make sure that, this also makes sure that there's certain patterns I can't put in. So I can't put in 666 or numbers between 900 and 999. These are governmental numbers, and 666 in Christianity terms is the mark of the beast. So no one in the United States can actually have a social security number with 666. And here's some simple credit cards that we've chosen. Discover, MasterCard, and Visa. These are real credit card numbers generated with the Lana algorithm. But again, they're 100% safe when they're associated with things like first name and last name that are also synthetically generated as well as addresses. So here you can see very quickly how I just specified how you can specify, go in and create a domain, add attributes, add generators, but now this is raw data, which means it has no form going output to some particular endpoint, which is why now we go to the receivers. And you have the option here of looking at and selecting from our 63 different types of receivers, just walking through them so you get an idea. And I'm going to go to a common receiver, an XML file receiver. This is flat XML as opposed to nested XML. We do nested XML, nested JSON, and many other types of nesting, but I'm showing a simple one here. Each receiver has its own set of parameters. Most of the defaults are set. I'm just setting one that I need here. And the receiver automatically associates itself to the attributes. You can even determine the output behavior of the attributes. And then once you've added that fourth component, all you have to do now is add the fifth component, which is the scenario. And the scenario will create the story that you actually need in order to produce data. And what it says here, just as we said before, by default, it chooses a loop count. It says we want to generate 10,000 users. And because right now, this particular domain is not associated to any other domain for parent-child relationships, you see the icon here as a root. Now, all we have to do is hit the download button. And what GenRocket does is it creates a scenario, which is a set of instructions in XML. It zips that and encrypts it, and we can download that to our local computer. So I'm now flipping over to a command line. But let me know, Garth, if you can see the command line.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so here you can see there, I downloaded the user scenario. It's a little 22K file, and it doesn't matter whether I'm generating 1 row of data or a billion rows of data. It will always be, in this particular one will be 22K. Now, once you've downloaded the GenRocket runtime, which is a set of Java jars, you'll see a set of commands here, but now that because it's Java, this means it'll run basically on any computer that has a Java runtime, whether that's Windows, Linux, Unix, Macs, or even some mainframes. We have many command line commands. I want to run GenRocket-R, which is a small r. And as soon as it kicks off and loads the runtime and loads GenRocket, it'll start generating data. And remember, we were generating to the XML file receiver. So let's take a look at the results of that output. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So remember, we started out with the ID with the range generator starting out at 1,000 and increasing by 1. We had the random first name, last name, and middle initial. We had the username. Remember, I removed that generator and added the concat generator. There we have our social security numbers in sequence, our real credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, and Discover in their sequence, random phone numbers. And remember, we took the ID and we encrypted it with MD5 hash. And we moved it over to the end. And sure enough, if I scroll down to the bottom, we can see that we did, in fact, generate 10,000 rows of data. I'm going to hand it back over to Garth so you can summarize.
Thanks, Aysel. Wonderful demo. So I want to go back and sort of pull together the pieces that Aysel showed, all of the, because what tends to happen is that he shows that simple demo and it shows how quickly and easily you can model data, and it's not necessarily understood all the different applications of GenRocket. So here is the patented engine, and what you saw Aysel doing was building, ultimately by using the platform in the cloud, he was able to build a scenario, that instruction set for a user, and he applied an XML receiver, and so now you've got a scenario, it's generating data for a user in XML format, and that can be used for unit testing or for functional testing, integration, load. You get the idea. All kinds of different test use cases, including regression. And of course, GenRocket, all customers are using us for automated testing. So we're used with Jenkins, with CI/CD pipelines, popular tools like Selenium. And whether it's commercial or custom testing tools, GenRocket, of course, is able to integrate into those particular platforms. And it's not understood also because it's such a simple demo, the extent of this platform. So we have 9, he showed you one method with Scratchpad, but there's 9 different methods to set up a project, including our XTS or extract table schema that can reach into a database, get the metadata, and very quickly set up a test data project for hundreds or thousands of tables. And then once that's set up, you can see we have self-service operations. So we have very powerful self-service capabilities around test data cases and rules and queries. And part of the automations come from this very powerful dynamic API. So customers will start with GenRocket and sort of crawl and then walk and then run. And the running part involves making dynamic automated decisions leveraging the GenRocket API. And there's numerous components in the platform that allow you to manage. We mentioned earlier, lifecycle management, so that when your models change, it's dynamically updated. The ability to manage scenarios so you don't have to worry about all the different scenarios for your test cases, and so forth, as you can see on the screen. Now, we want to go back to Aysel again and do demo number 2. So what we're doing is sort of pulling all of this together. And just to give you a sense, when we talk about test automation and integrating with test data automation, what are we talking about? Well, when you want to have your automated test cases, you want to be able to inject that data from a test data scenario into that series of automated test cases. And because a test case can deliver data in about 100 milliseconds, and a scenario can control the volume and variety of data. So it could generate 1 row of data or 1 million rows of data. It can have those permutations and edge cases. So you can sort of get a sense of how that can be used. And when the test case is done, we don't need to have that data sit around. It doesn't have to be there again. So you can clear it and then run the next test case. And then, of course, the next test of fresh data is generated. So Aysel, I'd love to hand it off to you and sort of set the stage around, because this is a new way of thinking, isn't it, in terms of how you integrate test data in an automated environment.
Yes, give me 1 second here.
Sure.
In my screen. Okay, so this comes up a lot. Many people ask, how does GenRocket integrate in an automated environment, especially as one as popular as Jenkins? And how does that work and what's entailed? And what we did here is we put together a 3-minute and 1-second video that describes some of the ways and interesting ways that GenRocket works with a product like Jenkins, and this will work with Selenium and Jenkins built in. And think about this not just for Jenkins, but for any other automated platform as well, tool as well. Hello, in this GenRocket Solutions video, we're going to specifically show how you can synergistically automate your functional testing challenges using Jenkins, Selenium, and GenRocket. With Jenkins, you can define when to launch a mechanism, where to launch a mechanism, and how to launch a mechanism. With Selenium, you can execute test actions in a web browser. And with GenRocket, you can run test plans, generate zero-touch real-time test data, and call Selenium methods to perform functional tests. Let's take a look at a simple sequence diagram to see how these 3 components work together. Oh, hold on. This is not as complicated as it looks. Let me explain. In Jenkins, we create a job to open a shell and run GenRocket, which loads a test plan, a scenario, then executes the test plan. Iterating through the test plan, it reads a step, generates test data when necessary, then calls a Selenium method to perform a functional test within a web browser. Now, GenRocket has on its own platform the ability to create test plans and run its own black box tests. But you can also use GenRocket with your own Selenium black box solutions to generate zero-touch real-time test data. Okay, let's show a few GenRocket black box tests being automated through Jenkins. But first, we want to show that we create specific subdirectories where GenRocket can find test plans that execute functional tests and scenarios for generating zero-touch real-time test data. When we log into Jenkins, we'll go to the job that we created to automate our black box testing. From there, we'll go to the configuration page and scroll to the section called Execute Shell. Here, we've entered a command to open a bash shell to run GenRocket for test plans within a given directory and turn on login. Yep, that's it. That's pretty much all there is to it. Okay, let's kick off a Jenkins build that will open a bash shell and run GenRocket to execute test plans within a given directory. We'll click into a Jenkins console so that we can see the logging of the test plans being executed. In a true CI/CD pipeline, Jenkins would normally run this job from a triggered event, such as a background build process. Now that the job is complete, we can open a command line terminal and go to the directory where GenRocket created and stored a report for the set of functional tests that it executed. Here's where you can see the true value of having a fully automated CI/CD pipeline with zero-touch real-time test data. When code is implemented or existing code is modified and pushed to a build, bugs can be detected and eliminated before they reach your production environment. In summary, by combining Jenkins for your CI/CD pipeline with Selenium for functional testing and GenRocket for zero-touch real-time test data, you can achieve true test automation synergy. Thank you for watching this GenRocket's Solutions video.
Garth, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Wonderful. Hi, Sel. Thank you so much. So when we now talk about, we've introduced GenRocket test data automation to you, our platform. Heisel is giving you an introductory demo and then showed you the whole thing, the solution. But that's not actually the complete solution, is it? So if you think about your requirements when you're implementing GenRocket in an enterprise, what are the requirements? You need the tool, you're generally going to need testers, and you're also going to need some implementation services. And I want to hand over now to our partner Kualitatem and Sami Ula. And Sami, would you take the group through some of the services that Kualitatem offers as they relate to GenRocket and test data automation?
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Heisel, for the demo. Hi, everyone. I'm going to start with the introduction first, and next I'll talk about what sort of services we offer regarding test data automation, and then we will open the floor for Q&A session. So Qualitative is basically an independent software QA consultancy, testing and information security company. And it's been more than 12 years now that we are working in this vertical. So far, we have served 500 plus clients across the globe, including Fortune 1000 clients. We have been ranked by Gartner twice as top 10 testing service provider, and that is globally. We have 7 plus experience, 7 plus years of experience regarding test data, and 10 plus years of experience regarding automation part. So I'm going to start with the test data challenges first. These are the basic points, and that client often, come to us and say they're facing these sort of challenges and they want solutions for these challenges as well. So when it comes to, business processes coverage in your testing, being in the industry for more than 12 years now, we have seen lots of transformations happening. We have seen transitioning from automation, manual to automation part. We have seen the tools evolving. So, all of this stuff comes up with different sort of challenges that we have to, figure out for clients. So when it comes to business processes coverage, it's not just about covering the positive conditions, you have to test the negative conditions as well. So the better business processes are which cover, both parts. Plus, when it comes to, different testing different sort of permutations, testing different edge cases, so you have to take care of all those parts as well. Then provisioning of data. You have to provide the data at the speed of the deployment and development. So in today's world, when the things are moving towards CI and CD, it's very important to increase the speed of data provisioning as well. So that's another challenge our clients come up with. Then we have data quality and security. You cannot have a good quality software without having a good quality data. So it's all about, data quality plus the client for security as well. Different formats and sources of data is another challenge, and that is sort of, for example, client wants, the data be provided in such and such formats. This could be images. This could include the databases as well. This could include different formats of data as well. So, and the last part is data sharing and reusability. Client often wants to have, the data be shared for different projects among different teams, maybe among different environments. So this is also a major challenge by a client. So yeah, the next slide is about our test data management approach. We basically divide our approach into 3 stages, starting with the first stage, what we call gearing up. So in the first phase, we develop a business case, considering all the legal and governance sort of issues, what processes we have, what roles we have right now on the client side, what knowledge and skill side the client has, what sort of products and tools are being used by the client. So we sort of call it, scanning the overall structure. Scanning the overall structure can cover the environments, can cover the tools, can cover the skill sets and all that. So based on our analysis, we come up with a recommendation of, which TDM, test data management tool, the client should go with. And then we provide a complete implementation plan for that test data management tool. The second phase is then the pilot phase, where we sort of pick up one project from client side. And normally what we try to do is we try to pick up some project which is of medium scale, not a bigger project, not a smaller project. And that project should be covering all the scenarios and all the possible areas that could probably show the client what the TDM, what benefits and what improvements the TDM tool could bring in. So once we are done with the POC and we have the results with us, we can show those results to the client, and client can actually see the improvement that has been made in the process for client. And once we have the results of one project, we lay out a roadmap for all the projects on the client side. So we start on executing or the implementation part based on the data model for all the projects on the client side, considering all the stuff that I have mentioned earlier. And last part is the support part, where we are done with execution part. We have implemented the TDM tool, and integrated the automation part in all the projects running at client side. So now we give a time span of production support where client can come to us, and if they are facing any sort of issues, they can always come up and ask the questions from our team. So the next slide, God, please. Yeah. So our partnership with GenRocket. We provide the testing services, and we have GenRocket certified resources with us. And when it comes, in the previous slide, when I mentioned the first phase where we sort of select the test data management and automation tool, there are some factors that we, consider while the tool is being selected. So, God, hope you can hear me.
Go ahead, Sammy.
Okay, great. So these are the factors we consider while selecting the tool, and these factors are the reason why we have this partnership with GenRocket, because GenRocket meets all these factors as well. So starting with the complexity first, the traditional testing data management solutions tend to be complex and costly as well. So as you've seen Hassel and Gart mentioning that when it comes to traditional test data management solutions, they normally rely on production data. And while working on the production data, they have to go through the cycle, which is, pulling the data, masking it, copying it, and refreshing it. So obviously that thing makes it a complex overall scenario. So which is not the case with GenRocket. And plus this is cheaper solution as well. The speed. When it comes to, the manual creation of data, that takes time. And test data creation, when it comes to GenRocket, you can have data generated in milliseconds. And for example, if you are working on some volume loads or you have some bigger applications in your environment, you can probably run multiple instances of GenRocket, and you can generate data in minutes. Adaptability. Each client is a unique individual, and every client will come up with different sort of testing tools that they are using, different sort of environments they have, different sort of skill sets they have, and different sort of integrations as well. So GenRocket can be easily integrated with, as we have seen, Jenkins, Selenium, different testing tools. It could be integrating a CI/CD pipeline as well. So this gives another plus point to this tool. And last point, the support. As I have mentioned, we have certified GenRocket experts with us, testers with us. And when it comes to, the most important thing when you select a tool for us is, make sure that sufficient support is available as well. So oftentimes it happens like your resources are working with the client, and the client has some unique sort of scenarios to be executed, and we might not have worked on such sort of business logics. So you can always reach out to support to get solutions of that. So GenRocket always comes up with quick solutions. And,
wonderful.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Sammy, that was wonderful. So what we want to do now is we want to go to the question and answer session, and we have the chat area. I'm just going to say chat here, just so everybody can see that. And we've already got some questions coming in, and I'm going to start to pass those questions out. And let's keep the questions coming in from the group. So I'm going to, from Adil, I'm going to go to your questions. Yes, several, and we're going to start this. So Haisel, if you could come on camera, that would be great.
I am.
Okay, super. I don't need to show a PowerPoint of question and answer. So I'm going on camera, and let's see, stop share. Okay, there we go. So the first question, Haisel, is how do you handle custom regex-based input generators, such as not random values, but certain combinations based upon defined regex?
Okay, so a couple of things. One, we do have a regex generator. So if you just want to basically put a regex expression in there, you can. Secondly, we have a principle about testing. You want to make your test or the data you're generating very simple so that you don't have to test it. So that being said, the power of our generators is that they can talk to each other. So we not only have generators that just generate data, most of them don't even generate random data, because random data is actually not that good for testing, but they tend to generate data in patterns. But because they can talk to each other, and because you can link them together, then you can create complex data that you want very simply with patterns, such as we have a if then else gen, a case gen, a switch gen, a multi-weight gen, which does percentages. And now if you want to get really complicated and build some really complex test data around for testing really complex rules, then you can go to our feature called test data rules, where you can put in complex if then else statements and so forth to generate any type of data you want.
Awesome, Heisel, great. Next question is, it's a setup question. So it's saying, is there a sort of a bulk upload setup feature so we don't have to add all the details manually?
Yes. So I did show early in the display that when you select to create a domain, you have different options. There are many different options for bringing data in, but our most popular option is through our GenRocket XTS extract table schema, which directly connects to any database over JDBC. It can pull the metadata, not the data, but the metadata from the database, which would be the table name, the attribute names, their types, foreign key relationships, and pull that directly into our environment. We can handle up to 10,000 tables with 100 attributes, which is over 1 million attributes, and pull that into our environment in around 8 minutes. Now, there's a wizard that you can use afterwards where you can specify which attribute is which relationships is a parent, and the rest automatically become siblings. And then we also have a data warehouse at the back end that does its best to attach the appropriate generator to each attribute. And we have wizards, which allows you to make modifications, not only making change to one, changing a generator on attribute, but automatically then using regex and things like that to make changes to many other attributes.
Awesome, Heisel. These are one third question from Adil, and then we've got a question coming from Awais coming up next. But the third question from Adil is about data masking and obfuscation. He said, how do you mask sensitive information in GenRocket?
Sure. So this often comes to when people are trying to take data from a production environment and migrate that over to a staging environment. We have some basic tools for doing that too, where you can migrate data from production to staging. And when that happens, what you're doing is you're specifying in a domain which attributes are sensitive. So let's say a social security number, credit card number, birth date, or something like that. And when that data is being migrated, we actually never touch the sensitive data. So which means we don't do obfuscation, we do synthetic data replacement. That makes it 100% secure because you're never ever touching that insecure value, and you have control over actually what the data is going to look like. Because in production, just because you have the behavior of a social security number or a credit card number or birth date, you don't know if that data is accurate or valid. And it's often random, and you want to create patterns even when you're migrating, so that your testers have control over the test data that they want to test with.
Wonderful, Heisel. Those are the three questions asked by Adil. Now the next question is coming from Awais, and he is saying, your framework is best suitable for which environments, and which environments is it not such a good fit for?
Okay, when you say environments, are you talking
basically about solutions and customers? Where would GenRocket not be helpful, and where is it helpful in terms of test data?
Sure. If you're doing the old TDM model, where you're thinking you have to bring over an entire database and create data lakes and things like that, well, the GenRocket is not suited for that, because we're about real-time test data generation, which means it's actually suitable everywhere. I designed GenRocket not to solve one test data challenge. I designed GenRocket to solve any test data challenge. And I did that because of 25 years of working in multiple startups and being a chief architect consultant for many others. Every single environment I walked into, they all wanted the same goal, was how do we get to 98% testing our code? You can never hit 100% because there's always something new to test. But each environment was different in solving that challenge. So what you get about GenRocket is it's made not to be intrusive. It's made to go into your environment to help you to discover the challenges you want to solve, and then to automate them over time.
And I just want to add to what you're saying, Heisel, because we have a number of customers using us to test their data warehouses and data lakes. and do ETL. And so we're very much part of that. We did a webinar last week with Query Surge, and it was around ETL. So we absolutely usable for data lakes, but not in the traditional,
right,
scenario. The next question, so hopefully that answers your question, Awais. Shob is asking for what about Oracle Fusion Cloud apps, test data generation for Oracle Fusion Cloud applications?
So I'm not clear what Oracle Fusion is, but let me just talk about cloud applications in general. So you have two different key ways that you want to look at testing with GenRocket. If you're the typical engineer like myself, what I used to do before I invented GenRocket was if I had to create some test data, I'd either pull up a spreadsheet, or if it was more complicated, I'd pull out one of my languages like Python or Groovy or something, and I'd spend an hour or two writing the code I need to generate data. Now, a tester like myself or any of the other engineers I know, they just go to GenRocket within 2 or 3 minutes. They create the data, they model the data they want, they download the scenario, and they run it. So that's running test data on your local computer with the GenRocket runtime. Now, there are other situations where, let's say you want to run a full suite of regressions, a regression test, you want to run that on your testing server, your staging server, which is often in the cloud, let's say on Amazon or Azure or possibly Oracle that you're talking about, in which case, you simply have a server up there where you install Java and you install the GenRocket jars and you run and test data in the cloud to run your full suite of regressions. You don't want to generate data in the cloud and then bring it down to your computer, because it just takes too long to do, and two, you're just putting too much data into the cloud where you can just generate the data immediately on your local computer. I hope that answered your question.
And I'll go to the next question from Donato. Donato's asking about, are there, well, he's referring to system adapters, but I think he's talking about receivers or just usage for ERP. So ERP enterprise applications.
So I'm just going to talk about this in general for any application. So this goes to the fourth component in the principle of GenRocket to be able to test anything. So the fourth component is the receiver. That receiver takes that data in raw format, morphs it into some usable format, and sends it to a particular endpoint. So we have currently around 63 different receivers that talk to many different things. Our most popular receiver is our generic SQL insert receiver, which to date has talked to every single SQL database, including some 40-year-old databases. We also have receivers that talk over REST, that talk over SOAP, that basically communicate anything we want, including Salesforce. So if there's a proprietary format or another format or endpoint that we're not able to talk to, we simply implement a new receiver and add it into our platform within 2 to 3 weeks. I hope that answers your question.
That's wonderful, Haisel. I want to, Adil, we may need a little more help from help on this one. So I'm going to read it, and then we'll just see what if we understand your question. So you said, do you have any numbers or graphs on time spent on accumulating test data manually versus time consumed by GenRocket versus time spent on total testing activity? And I'm not sure if I fully understand your question. Do you understand it, Haisel?
I do. So he's asking about statistics in terms of, what are the comparisons between, automating data and building data by hand. It's difficult to say because in different environments, it's different. We can tell you that we have some really large customers who have actually done videos and sent them to us where they were talking about how long it took them to do projects. There was one from, I think, Discover, Garth. The numbers were astounding from the manual process they were doing from, what was it, UATs. You remember the hours? Can you give me the—
Oh, sure, yeah. So to summarize, they were doing 6 UAT test runs per year. And it was taking them manually in spreadsheets with the best they could do with macros and so forth. It was 1,000 hours of work, and GenRocket was able to reduce that 1,000 hours down to 1 hour.
Yeah. So
10 minutes per run, but yeah. So that was 999 hours of savings.
Yeah, and the beauty of GenRocket, I'll say this too, is when you're dealing with spreadsheets or you're generating data by hand, you're thinking in 2 dimensions. And because you only have 2 dimensions in a spreadsheet, and trying to manage parent-child relationships across multiple spreadsheets is basically impossible for testers in general. When they never generally test beyond 3 tables, because after that it becomes more difficult. because GenRocket manages referential integrity, because it thinks in many different dimensions, testing just becomes infinitely more powerful and better as you go along and faster. I hope that generally that answers your question.
Great. So we're just about through the questions that I'm able to see. Sammy, I want to go to you. So Sammy, we're just coming to the end of the webinar, and it looked like the audience asked a number of technical questions about GenRocket and how it worked, and it was great to see GenRocket CTO Heisel Taylor answering those questions. Sammy, anything that you'd like to add to the conversation before we wrap up the webinar? Sammy might be on mute. Sammy, are you there?
Yeah. So just one thing on the last part that was about, you know, overall time that is taken for the execution part and implementation. I would second Heisel, because obviously it depends on, you know, what sort of requirements are, how many applications are there, and what sort of, you know, different areas we have to cover. So based on, you know, different these sort of conditions, we have to figure out what time could be. So it basically depends upon, you know, scale of the application. So that part, and that's it. I don't think any other question has to do with, you know, the implementation part.
Wonderful. So for those of you listening this is sort of your first time being exposed to GenRocket, it's pretty common that we work with our partners to do demos. We could do a personal demo for you. So you've had a quick introduction here, but we'd be happy at a separate time to collaborate on a personal demo so you can see more and ask more questions individually. And then oftentimes we will then move to a no-cost proof of concept. And sometimes that's delivered by our partners Kualitatem, sometimes by GenRocket, or we work together. That we don't have to worry about those details. The point is that if you want to go deeper, we want to offer that to you now as a follow-on. A next action step would be that meeting and a demo, and then potentially a proof of concept. And I think, Sammy, of course, you share that process in your slides about how that works with your clients, correct?
Yeah.
And I think that was a yes. Okay, everybody, again, thank you so much for joining us on the webinar today. Very hot topic when you look at the World Quality Report and talking about test data really being a pain. And we believe that GenRocket and Kualitatem together are providing a powerful combination solution set. And again, we want to invite you to visit our website to look at more information if you want to, or to reach out to us. Info@genrocket.com is one way to reach GenRocket in terms of making a request for a demo, and then we can move things forward. And again, just want to pass on words of safety to everybody. Of course, I know many of us are in lockdown, so we just are compassionate for you and your families in this difficult time. And so thank you so much for spending the last 57 minutes with the GenRocket Kualitatem team. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.